All right, welcome to the marketplace. Tonight we're going to be delving into the possibility of changes that are going to be felt in the economy, considering that there are a few tax amendments that are on the line that could be coming into effect by 30th of September. Now, these tax acts, these tax policies are going to be affecting you and your business. The changes are going to be affected by the Treasury, and of course we can start with some of the things that Mbadi had proposed, Mbadi being the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury and National Planning. Now, some of the things that he was proposing, or some of the things that we do know right now, is that the court declared the 2023 Act null and void, but it's still in the courts as the Act is still pending a hearing in the Supreme Court, and the existing tax acts to be amended are to widen the tax collection net. The Treasury plans to introduce new tax amendments bill with 47 new clauses which will be in Parliament, and these are some of the things that your members of Parliament are going to be discussing that could be affecting you. Now, we do know that this Finance Act, these finance policies are some of the things that are going to be changing the fiscal policies when it comes to revenue collection in the country. And we have the best people to talk about it. Now, some of the things that the Cabinet Secretary of Treasury was, of course, trying to have in place is reducing tax expenditure, extending the tax amnesty, because he did say that he noticed a lot of individuals were now paying their taxes, and he did promise a thorough public participation, and he did want to move various items from zero to exempt. There was a rush towards having new measures by September 30th and a raft of changes to KRA. Now, when it comes to public participation, we're going to tell you what Kenyans are saying. Let's take a look.
Finance bill tulikataa na hata president akaitupilia mbali. Sasa ningeomba Minister Bwana Mbadi wa Finance awache kutuchezea mchezo wa kuingiza, kwa sababu ndiye anacheza sasa.
Finance bill ilete changamoto zake, na pia ikawa mwananchi pia haelewi hasa kwa kina faida yake ilikuwa nini, kuitoa kwa percentage iliyokuwa tunafanya na hizo riba zake, na ile kupandishwa kwake madhara ambayo ingeleta. Basi kidogo mwananchi paka sasa hivi bado uko gizani, na sasa ndo tunaona impact yake baada ya ile finance bill kuanguka.
So ni vizuri sana tujue ya kwamba hayo mambo ambao wanarudisha sasa ni yale yalikataliwa ama ni mengine mapya. Tena tunataka kusema ya kwamba kupitia hizi kodi wafanyabiashara walipata kuona ya kwamba mambo mengi ama taxes nyingi ambazo walikuwa wameleta kama za biashara, wakulima, mambo mengi tulikuwa tumeona yamekuja kuangamiza wananchi. Kwa hivyo nilikuwa naomba ya kwamba serikali isije ikarudisha finance bill yenye ilikataliwa.
Jambo la muhimu tungetaka hii financial bill ya mara ya pili itakuwa inatumiza sana sasa kama wajiko ama wagio, manake ni vile kama hizi product huwa tunanunua tukuja kukuuzia wajiko mwenzangu hapo ground, yenyewe itakuwa bei juu sana kuliko vile nilikuwa nanunua. Kwa hivyo hii bill itatumiza na hatutaki tena iagamize wajiko wa hapa chini.
Tuna survive kwa kustruggle kwa sababu biashara haziendi, unajaribu biashara inaanguka, alafu tunaweza sema upande wa customers wamekuwa wachache kwa sababu wengi wao hawana pesa.
Chai watu wanakunywa ile strong, ingine hata haina sukari, na vile watoto walikuwa wamezoelea kunywa chai na kitu, chai ya mkono miwili. Sasa hii chai ya mkono miwili Kenya hii hakuna. Tumerudi maskini, wale maskini wenyewe.
Serikali ikiendelea kuongeza vitu vingine, hata watu watashindwa ni kununua hata sukari, chumvi, itakuwa ni mabaya sana.
All right, that's what Kenyans had to say. That's what you had to say. Public participation is very, very important when policies are being changed, because these are the things that are going to be, taking you through some of the things that you do in your daily operations. Now, already in studio, we do have a couple of gentlemen who are just going to be introducing themselves. I have an economist. I have, of course, the person with the math, an FCPA who's going to be be taking us through all the math. And of course, I have Job Wanjohi, who is just going to be taking us through what manufacturers have to say. Dr. Bob, I'll start with you. Please introduce yourself. Tell us, how is our economy doing?
Good evening, Ibak, and good evening, viewers. My name is Bob Ndubi. I work with Silverhouse Capital. In terms of the economy, obviously, everybody is talking about the economy. And after what we've gone through with the Gen Zs not too long ago, anything to do with the economy and taxes are very emotive at the moment. So the general acceptance is the economy is not doing well.
All right.
And that comes across not only from every other Kenyan, but even from the government. And I think some of the things that are very emotive at the moment is in a sense trying to address the situation we find ourselves.
All right.
We might not agree how to go about it, but we generally agree that the economy is not doing well.
The economy is not doing well. When it comes to numbers, FCPA, maybe if you could just tell us, of course, they're throwing around numbers. We need this amount for taxes. We need this amount to collect for the people. We need this amount for the budget. We cannot reduce the budget. We can only increase taxation and, of course, have austerity measures in place. Maybe tell us, do we need as much as the government is telling us we need?
That's a good question, Hibak, because really, there's a school of thought that says, our problem as a country is not tax revenue problem. Our problem is an expenditure problem.
Right.
In other words, we are spending much more than we ideally ought to be spending.
Right.
And there's a question that taxpayers are asking. We're already paying taxes.
Right.
Can we see you using those taxes that we are paying in a manner that instills confidence in taxpayers so that taxpayers can pay a bit more?
Right.
And that's part of the reason why you see there's a conversation about, let's have a tax amnesty, let's have more people paying taxes, let's expand the tax base. So that really is a question. However, I still agree that we need to have conversations. And like Bob says here, the discussions around that have been precipitated by the Gen Zs are things that we actually need to have a conversation about as a country. Do we need this amount of tax?
Right. And of course, we have sampled what some of the Kenyans are saying on the ground. And I'm sure, Job, when it comes to your job, of course, as the Kenya Association of Manufacturers Policy Head and Research Head, you do get to interact with a lot of manufacturers. What are they saying?
Yes. Going back to where we were, as far as Finance Bill 2024 was concerned, that was rejected, we had our own reservations.
Right.
And we hope that the reservations we had are going to be captured in the measures that the government is talking about that are likely to come before end of September 2024.
Right.
If I would give an example of eco-levy, it is one area that we had reservations on because it was a duplicated levy. We have what is called extended producer responsibility that is in place and is working very well.
Right.
About 1,000 manufacturers have subscribed to this.
Right.
We have been able to mop up from the environment, the PET bottles and the plastic materials of almost 40,000 metric tons.
Right.
So it has been working. So why duplicate with another levy? So we are looking forward to have the special document in terms of a bill or in terms of policy pronouncement, fiscal policy pronouncement by the government, so that now we can internalize and give a position thereof.
Right. Job, the Cabinet Secretary, of course, did say that he is looking, or the Treasury is looking towards returning the eco-levy, but not touching on contentious matters that could be raising heckles. But there are things that he did not mention which could raise heckles in the manufacturing sector. If we just look towards some of the proposals that were in the Finance Bill 2024, what do you believe are some of those things?
I've seen, the CS has mentioned, that there are various goods that are likely to move from the zero rated to exempt status.
Right.
I'm going to give an example of pest control products. If we see the movement of pest control products that are used as farm inputs, then we will see the cost of such inputs becoming higher for the consumers, and these are the farmers, because manufacturers, even though they will not be able to cater for the extra costs on taxation because of the exempt status, they have to push over to the manufacturers. So we have reservation on that, and we had expressed this. The indication was that the government has had, and we hope that even now they are still hearing, and they're not likely to bring such change in terms of zero rate to exempt status. We had a heavy discussion around the bread movement from 16% to exempt again. So we hope that we're not going to go back from where we were as far as the Finance Bill 2024 is concerned. They will have incorporated the views that Rob, they have brought on board, or even manufacturers had brought on board, so that we have a progressive conversation.
Robert, I've seen you laughing, so let me put the spotlight on you a little bit. When it comes to, the contentious bread levy that could be possibly added, and, adding a VAT on this particular very, very delicate product for a lot of Kenyans, the government is saying if we remove our feelings and we put that 16% VAT, we could be, having an extra 70 billion as revenue. What is your stance on that?
Well, my personal view is that we need to be very careful about the things that we subject to VAT. And I agree that there's a conversation about the tax expenditure here being the amount that government forgoes when they zero rate or they exempt products. Absolutely. I mean, if you think about the statistics, we're talking about 3% of our GDP going into that tax expenditure. And that's why you had the president talking about we need to look at these items. Absolutely, we need to look at them. However, when you look at bread, there's a presumption that this is just for the very rich.
Creme de la creme.
Exactly. But that's not. That's if you go to a construction site, the guys who are doing the affordable housing at lunchtime, if you don't have a mama mboga who has brought you lunch, you are eating a half a loaf of bread and a soda. So it really is not an item for the rich. And that's the reason why it caused such a huge debate when they said we're going to remove it from the zero rating status. I think the way to go about it, Hibaki, is let's have a phased approach. We agree that we need to reduce the expenditure. However, can we have a time horizon? And even the national tax policy talks about not waking up one day and coming up with changes, because it's very disruptive for businesses. So let's have a phased approach where we say, this year we're going to reduce these items. Then next year we're going to reduce this other item, so that even people can plan themselves. So I do agree that we certainly need to look at our tax expenditure. However, it's got to be in a systematic manner.
All right. Now, a lot of people did have a few problems, especially when it came to these tax changes, Doctor. And some of the things that they were saying were problems was, having a new hype or having charges when it comes to sending finances. You are the CEO of a company. What do you think are some of the threats that could be in this particular amendment that the Cabinet Secretary is talking about?
To answer you, I need to pick it from where Robert left it. First, we are talking of having a national tax policy that is predictable. That if you're planning as a business or industry, you know what to expect next year or the next 2, 3, 4 years. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges. So coming back to what you're saying, then what you're talking about in terms of taxing, whether it's financial products or money transfer or any of the products in that particular space, what you're essentially telling people is that then financial services are becoming more expensive. So whether you want to send money through M-Pesa or any of the digital platforms, you're going to charge more. What does that mean? It means then we go back to how we used to do it. Get it into an envelope, give it to somebody and transfer. And that then as a nation, we start losing out in terms of getting all the data around the financial industry, the transactions and all that, which we are not doing too well, but I think we've improved over the last many years. So in terms of then, even tax collection, we are actually making it harder to have the data that helps us to address that.
When it comes to data, Robert, and mathematically speaking, of course, the fact that we don't know how these policies are being changed. We keep waking up to new changes all the time. I'm sure investors are even very wary of coming into the Kenyan market. Could there be a way to make it more predictable that could enable all of us to have a good environment to work in?
And I think there is a Hibak, because, and the CS has actually alluded to it, we need to be guided by the national tax policy. That's the starting point.
Right.
Because you see, for example, the national tax policy says we want to encourage this sector, say manufacturing, for example. So what do we need to do in order to encourage this sector? Perhaps we need to stop imposing the eco-levy.
Right.
Perhaps we need to support this sector by giving this kind of incentive so that they can employ more people, that kind of a thing. So the starting point, in my view, has to be the national tax policy. Then the next one has to be that these decisions have to be data driven. So we need to say, for example, what Bob is saying, transfer of money. How has imposing excess duty on transfer of money impacted financial inclusion? Because if you think about it, there are very few people with bank accounts, you know, like brick and mortar bank accounts. However, M-Pesa probably has got 30 million or so registered users.
All right.
Financial inclusion. And remember, when you look at some of these policies like financial inclusion, you're actually going to be able to support initiatives like expanding the tax base. Because then it means that you can track transactions, and like what Bob is saying, where I'm sending money in an envelope, you'll never be able to track that transaction. You track that transaction, we expand the number of people who are paying taxes, and it's better for everybody. Last point, Hibak. We need to allow time for some of these policies to run their course so that we can actually evaluate whether they are achieving their intended purpose. But sometimes we find that a proposal has come in this year, the next year it's been removed, and then the following year. And a very good example is VAT on exported services. You ask anybody about VAT on exported services, it's very confusing. If you're talking about Kenya being a business process outsourcing hub, it becomes very confusing because we really don't know. So let us give time. Let these policies run for 3 to 5 years. Let's evaluate the impact, and then we can all change.
All right. Robert is talking about a situation where we can all predict what's going to happen because policies are going to be easier to even make. We go for a very short break, but when we come back, Job, maybe if you could just tell us what are some of the things that the manufacturing sector could add when it comes to data to this. We go for a very short break. When we do come back, we're going to be giving you even more insights. Don't go too far.